Moffat's going to be there. Gagan's going to be there. So is Leachy, Chocolates Robertson and Brock. Big, bad Sandown. Big, bad Sandown today. The tough circuit.
When the flag drops, the bull stops. The battle for supremacy continues in what has become the game of the name. The bigger the name, the greater the chance of winning. The stakes, advertising and promotion. Touring car racing, one of the biggest and fastest growing areas of public entertainment, is a giant stage for promotion, for big companies with money to participate, to show off and advertise their products, and the rewards are increased sales. It could cost a private individual up to $100,000 a year to compete. And even if he flukes a win in the company of factory-prepared muscle machinery, the rewards will do little to offset the cost of winning. Manufacturers invest enormous amounts to keep their cars up front, because while prize money is comparatively negligible, advertising value is colossal. Those who compete without the backing of vehicle manufacturers depend heavily on sponsorship to stay in the race. Support comes in the form of handouts and money from oil and tyre companies, and in isolated cases from businesses not associated with the motor industry, such as soft drink and cigarette manufacturers. But only those at the top qualify for extensive sponsorship. It's said you can judge the success of a driver by the number of insignia on his car or his driving gear. A sponsored driver may spend $600 for a day's racing, a prohibitive figure for the privateer. Some, however, still participate and write off the cost to promotion of their business interests. One is Sydney driver Mike Gore, who spends about $25,000 a year and writes a vitriolic column in one of the racing magazines. He has firm ideas about the problems of competition.
In a nutshell, what's wrong with motorsport today?
The promoters. It's had the claw.
What have they done to it?
They're making too much money and they're not sharing it around. They're not prepared to listen. They're not prepared to help the competitors. All they want to do is line their own pockets.
But most promoters will give evidence and will state quite categorically that they're only just clearing on most meetings.
I don't give a damn. That's a load of crap. That is a load of crap. I don't know how many people of the ARDC attracted to the last meeting at Bathurst. I believe it was somewhere around 15 or 16,000 people. But, well, for example, they paid $12 first prize to the winner of one of their races, which was a Division 1 touring car race. And if you won your class, you got another $12. $24 for 40 miles of Bathurst. 40 miles that probably cost you $400 bloody to compete.
Sandown Park race circuit in Melbourne is administered by the Light Car Club of Victoria, competitions manager Paul Harrington.
We are, in fact, at Sandown, we put 25% of the actual cost of the meeting is in prize money. We would not make 25% on a meeting ourselves, so if we were to sort of up our prize money to any great degree without sponsorship to pay for it, then we'd be very soon out of business. Now, the moment we go out of business, so does the competitor, because he's got nowhere to run.
Then again, prize money of, say, $40 for some races seems pretty meagre.
Well, $40 here would be a very small race, 5 or 6 laps probably, which, let's face it, is, what, 10 miles? If we were running anything of any importance, you'll find that the first prize will be, well, around about $100.
If the choice is theirs, then why continue if they only lose?
Because we're fools, obviously. It's motor racing's a disease. You try and convince yourself that it's a financial advantage to your business. It's good advertising, but quite obviously the money that's spent in motor racing, if it went into Pink Pages advertising or something else, you get a lot more results from it. I think that we keep going because we love it. Yeah, it gets into your blood. Somebody once said that it was like bashing your head up against a brick wall and paying for the privilege, and the only time it hurts is when you stop.
One of the elite is Melbourne driver and multi-millionaire businessman Bob Jane. He uses motorsport mainly to promote business interests in the car and allied enterprises.
How much money, if you can put a figure to it, do you put into motor racing?
Well, we spend more than $100,000 a year. But as
Is this all just for fun then? Just because you like racing?
Oh, no. There's many side issues. I mean, we're sponsored by oil companies, tyre companies, accessory companies, and of course by my own companies. And we get starting money, we get prize money. The income from motorsport for me, fortunately, brings me out about square. It doesn't cost me practically a cent.
Could you say then that the main draw card of motor racing today is the sort of car that the average person on the road can identify with?
There's no question about that. Many people in the sport and many people, including myself at times, have tried to go back to the pure motor racing, as most people call it, the open wheel racing cars, but it's unquestionably a fact that the public, the massive public, the majority of the public come to see the touring cars, the Mustangs, the Camaros, the Holdens, the Falcons and the Valiants, all racing, the cars that they themselves drive or see on the roads, and the cars that they, as you said yourself, can identify themselves with. There's no question about that.
The Ford company, successful with its performance cars at the last Bathurst 500, spends an undisclosed amount on what it calls special vehicles activities, but says its spending represents 10% of its overall sales promotion budget. Before its involvement with motor racing, Ford had a 15% share of the Australian vehicle market. Since then, it's climbed to 22%, a figure which the company says is significant. Special Vehicles Manager Al Turner.
We don't really look at it in terms of money. We look at it in terms of development and improvement of product. We feel that we better our vehicles by competing and learning what some of the advantages and disadvantages of them are, and then we can pass this on to the public to improve systems such as braking and your kick-down and passing times and all of this.
Well, and how important do you rate motor racing as a promotional avenue?
I'd say it's one of the primary reasons that we're in it, is that it has value. Everybody likes a winner, nobody likes a loser. And they all want to be associated with either a product or a vehicle which is capable of putting them up front, or having, let's say, to hold your head up and be proud that you own it or you're associated with it.
If the average guy in the street sees a Ford Falcon win at Warwick Farm, well, he's thinking either a Falcon or a Monaro, there's a real good chance he'll go and buy a Ford Falcon. And vice versa. If a Holden gets up and wins, then it does affect him and he goes out and buys one. The Ford Motor Company have proved this. Their sales swing has been predominantly in the GT type car, the performance image is what people are used to now, and they look for it.
General Motors Holden are also in the race, but participate in a backdoor fashion through its Holden dealer team. Manager is Harry Firth, known as the Fox, for his ability to extract the ultimate from vehicle and driver.
Where does the money come from to run the Holden dealer team?
Well, I get an allocation, and it's not very much, I'll tell you. It's nothing like what people would have in mind. There's not a great big barrel which you dip into and just funds come out.
Can you disclose the amount?
Very limited. No, well, I don't think that would be quite ethical, really. But we don't spend a vast amount of money. In fact, if I spent too much money, I'd be in real trouble.
Well, where does this money come from?
It comes from the dealer council. There are 700 Holden dealers in Australia. They support the whole operation. Like, it is the Holden dealer team, and it runs for the dealers, by the dealers. Everywhere I go where there's a dealer, I'm welcome. It's his team for the day.
But there are Holden dealers who enter their own cars privately in direct competition with the dealer team to publicise their own businesses. One of these is Melbourne driver Graham Blanchard, who says it costs him $1,000 a month to compete. In almost 12 months in this class, Blanchard has yet to win a race. Against such odds, why persevere?
Well,
Well, the best laid plans of all men come unstuck at times. The mere fact that they might be all right half a second quicker, they're up there, but the thing is we are there with them, and we are there competing with factory-prepared cars and with named drivers. Now, they've only got to make a slight mistake, a slight error, go a little bit wide on a corner, spin or lose or blow up or get involved in a shunt. You've got them.
Harry, how do you see then the involvement of, say, the privateers and the enthusiasm they're putting into the sport? Don't you think they deserve perhaps a fairer go?
Yes, they do, but it's on their own head. They don't have to enter in this sort of race. They can go to the smaller circuits and enter in the small production races there and have a real ding-dong go between themselves, and we don't go there. But they will insist on coming to these major races where there's big involvement, and as a result they must be pretty well prepared to play second fiddle, because after all you can't, as an amateur, usually enter into the professional world and expect to do good. Like if you're a boxer, you get your head beaten off. Well, you don't get your head beaten off, but you don't win anything.
But meantime, you're just that much behind the factory-prepared cars.
Just that little whisker.
And
yes.
so it's still worth to you $1,000 a month to get up there for a share of the glory.
I reckon. Yes, I reckon. Yeah, we get, as I said before, we get a wash off of this with a certain amount of rub back. People associate your name with the names of the bigger time drivers all the time.
Touring car racing has become the biggest area of attraction in motorsport in the last 3 years because of the amount of money and promotion injected by sponsors. This has given rise to personalities like Alan Moffat, Norm Beachy and Bob Jane, and these are the ones people pay to see. But this could be a dangerous precedent because it's taken the spotlight from other, more sporting types of competition in favour of the sensational and spectacular. Only one driver has managed to gain the distinction of being a full-time professional. Through his own ability on the track and his business acumen, Alan Moffat lives entirely on the profits of his involvement in the sport. He has a small workshop and 2 of his own cars, besides testing and racing the Ford Company machines.
At the end of the year, I'm very lucky to rub much more than a couple of $1,000s together. But when you, and as you're sitting here, can look around, see that my net worth is certainly not zero. And if it was not for the fact that I could, I suppose, bail myself out with the sale of my equipment, I wouldn't be prepared to put as much into it as I do.
How much do you put into it then?
Well, tens of thousands. How's that?
Well, whose fault is it then that more people who put a lot of enthusiasm, time and perhaps their own personal money into motorsport in this country don't get more out of it?
I think we could justifiably look at the controlling body here for keeping motor racing in the doldrums to a degree. Unfortunately, they're in a bind. They do a fantastic job in the administration of the sport and getting the young drivers through and organizing that side of it. But certainly the commercial side of motor racing needs to have more attention. It needs to have a director in his own right, taking care of nothing but the commercial aspects of motor racing, and certainly touring car racing, sedan car racing, our Mustangs, our Falcons. There is no way anyone can compile figures that will show you that they are unpopular with the spectators of Australia.
The Confederation of Australian Motorsport, known as CAMS, administers all major facets of the sport in Australia. CAMS formulates the rules and competition regulations in addition to licensing drivers and meetings. The job of Secretary-General is a well-paid full-time position held for the past 20 years by Mr. Donald Thompson. Of all the bodies involved in motorsport, CAMS comes under fire from promoters, sponsors and drivers more than any other.
There's competition between track events such as racing and road events such as rallies and trials. I think perhaps the other problems could be better summed up by saying that we are a democratically elected controlling body, and the Confederation tends to get a lot of criticism from the very people who elected them. And I suppose communication's our problem, the business of explaining to our own members why decisions are made. And this is much more important than you might think. In my eyes, that's a major problem.
Well, people tend to regard CAMS and its control, the control which it exercises at large meetings, as rather amateur. What would you say to this?
Yes, I suppose most of our officials are amateurs in the true sense of the word. They are lovers of the sport, which is what amateur means, isn't it? At the organisational level, we have some professionals. At the administrative level, we have a handful. But by and large, the great membership and the great conduct of the sport on the large scale is all done by amateurs. But they must be amateurs who are criticising, I think.
Is it the aim of CAMS to foster motor racing as a sport?
Well, that's not only our aim, that's our mandate.
Then what's the attitude of people such as you to the intrusion of large firms using motorsport for promotional purposes?
Sardonic. I think that it's got to be admitted that sponsors, one and all, large or small, are using the sport for promotional purposes. Now, I don't see anything immoral or improper in this, but I do think it's immoral or improper for such people to claim that they're doing it in the interest of the sport. And it's an insult to anyone's intelligence to be asked to believe it. They're in it to sell more cars or oil or toilet paper or something, but they're not in it to foster the interest of motorsport.
Do you think that then perhaps touring car racing of the Bathurst 500 style is debauched?
I think, again, this is a personal view. I've got nothing against events of this kind, but people mustn't in their minds think that this represents the highest form of the sport. It's considerably easier to race in touring cars than it is in open wheelers. The risks are much higher in the latter than the former. One never hears of open wheelers, for instance, bashing each other deliberately in order to give the crowd a thrill, because it results in 2 funerals at least.
With all their grievances against promoters and other bodies involved with motorsport, it would seem a logical conclusion for drivers to band together and put up a united front. Then why don't they do this?
Because they haven't got the guts, mate. They're dead frightened of CAMS, the Confederation of Australian Motorsports, the unbelievable bloody hierarchy. If you dare so much as say anything against them, you've had it. You've had it. I can hear the cries from the Wailing Wall now. If this gets on television, well, I probably won't be racing next year. They don't have to give me any reason. They can take my licence off me without me knowing. And that's it.
Does CAMS feel that it owns the sport in this country?
Good heavens, no, we're the servants of the sport. We might be described as the butlers of the house. We have a certain authority in our own house, but it's subject to our masters, who are the ordinary members.
Nevertheless, it rules the sport with an iron fist.
Yes, well, butlers tend to rule below stairs with an iron fist too, I understand.
What's going to happen to the sport then? Can you see it becoming a stage for the big manufacturers and used for promotional purposes?
I can fear that. I certainly wouldn't look forward to it. I think the sport will always go on as long as there are motor cars, and don't forget there's more of them in Australia than all but a couple of countries of the world per capita. I think there'll always be motorsport of a sort, and it's better to have motorsport of a sort than a debauched pretension of motorsport at the highest level, in which money is the only determining factor.
But for the time being, money is the determining factor. Those with the money to go fast will stay out front in the game of the name, and the only thing likely to change is where it comes from. Promoters and others interested in fostering motor racing as a sport would like to see a greater involvement of companies not directly concerned with the motor industry. This, they say, will give greater opportunities to those not backed by big manufacturers and make motorsport generally more competitive for more people. Meanwhile, the also-rans will continue beating their heads against the wall for the thrill of the game.
They'll come in, they'll race 3 or 4 times, they'll frighten themselves spitless, or they'll run out of money. But there's 1,000 others who are prepared to take their place. It's a sort of a Walter Mitty world, and we all imagine that we can be Sterling Moss too.